A little over 21 years ago, David experienced something that still, on occasion, makes his blood run cold. David grew up going camping with his dad on Bear Island, which is, you guessed it, shaped like a bear, in the middle of Percy Priest Lake in Tennessee. Doesn't have any bears, it just looks like one. The island is only accessible by boat, and David and his dad go at least one weekend every summer. They have the perfect spot that they go to in a little bay area of the island that has a clearing in the woods where they set up camp. Has the perfect view of the lake and the best sunrises and sunsets. The summer of 2004, David is 11 years old, and they picked the weekend of the 4th of July for that year's trip. They head out Friday morning, July 2nd, get to the island, set up camp, and spend the rest of the day having fun out on the lake, including watching a fireworks show later that night from the boat, which, I gotta agree with David on this one, is a pretty spectacular experience. After the show, they head back to camp, and David is pretty tired after his long day of fun and decides to call it a night. He crawls into his sleeping bag and falls asleep to the sound of the waves lapping on the shore. Dad stays up with the fire for a while, but eventually joins David in the tent. Their tent sleeps 2 to 3 people and has windows on the sides. As you go in the tent, David is sleeping on the left and has the window cover unzipped to about halfway to let the breeze through. But even with those idyllic sleeping conditions, David wakes up from a dead sleep with an intense feeling of fear. The hair on the back of his neck and on his arms is standing straight up. He tries to listen for anything going on outside, trying to figure out exactly what woke him up. And all he can hear is that he can't hear anything. No crickets chirping, no owls, no wind, not even the waves splashing onto the beach. For reasons he's not sure of to this day, he turns his head to the window of the tent. It is pitch black outside, so there's nothing to see except a pair of red glowing eyes staring down at him. It's so black out that he can't even make out a figure, just those eyes. He's paralyzed with fear and locked in a staring contest with the floating red eyes. It takes everything David has in him to break the stare down, turn his head around, and shake his dad. Dad, wake up! Something's staring at us through the window. His dad half wakes up and tells David it's just a raccoon, and he hits the side of the tent to scare it off, with his eyes closed the entire time. David stays turned toward his dad, trying to tell himself that his dad is right. It's just a raccoon, but he can't help it. He has to look. He turns his head toward the window, and the eyes are still there, staring down at him, obviously not affected by Dad's scare tactics. David turns his head back toward his dad, squeezes his eyes shut, and prays that whatever this thing is, it goes away. Somehow, he manages to fall back to sleep, and the next thing he knows, it's morning. As soon as they both get up, David tries to tell his dad about what he saw in the window, but his dad just says there's nothing out there that has red glowing eyes. It was just a raccoon or something. So, David decides to just leave it alone. Funny thing is, they're supposed to be staying until Sunday. But that morning, David's dad says, "Sorry, kid, we're going home." They pack up all their gear, do a little last-minute fishing, and head on home. Once the calendar flips another year, and it's time to start planning the 2005 trip, David's dad says, "Sorry, Bear Island is closed this year." Now, David still hasn't quite gotten over last year yet, so he can't say that he's all that disappointed. But not only do they not go in 2005, but they never go back to Bear Island again. And just so you know, I checked with Grok, and there are no records or even conversations anywhere about Bear Island being closed to campers in 2005. Now that David is an adult, he wonders. He wonders if his dad actually did see something that night, but didn't want to tell David and freak him out. He wonders if his dad lied to cover up why they never went back. David's not sure what he encountered that night, but he's been doing his internet homework and thinks maybe it was a dogman. There are similarities. The woods going silent. Dogman eyes are usually reported to be amber, red, or blue in color, and they seem to enjoy the fear that they create in those they encounter. That certainly is true of David's encounter, but if it was a dogman, it was the quietest and cleanest one ever. No growling and no obnoxious smell. But if it wasn't dogman, that leaves an even scarier question. What was it? Ever since she was just a little girl, Molly's been drawn to all things paranormal. Her favorite times were those when she was tucked away in this big closet, complete with bookshelves and a cozy beanbag chair, completely lost in stories about ghosts and aliens for hours on end. So maybe it's not too shocking that she's had her fair share of strange encounters throughout her life. But this story, this one's got her mom as a witness, so we're not just dealing with a kid's overactive imagination here. The year is 2003, and 5-year-old Molly is living in this country house up in northern Michigan. Her dad's away on some business trip, leaving just her mom and her little brother and her holding down the fort. One night, while dad's still away, mom puts both kids to bed. Her brother decides he wants to snuggle up with mom in her room that night, leaving Molly sound asleep in the room she shares with her brother all by herself. Nothing unusual about any of this, until her brother wakes mom up with a strange question. "What is Molly doing over there?" he asks, pointing to the corner of the room. They both look over, and there's Molly, crouched down in the corner, giggling. They try talking to her, but instead of answering, Molly runs to the window and jumps out. This is a second floor window, so naturally, mom completely freaks out. She rushes to the window and looks out, expecting the worst. But there's nothing down there, no injured Molly on the ground below. She runs to Molly's room and finds her exactly where she should be, sound asleep in her bed. Mom lets her sleep and tells her over breakfast the next morning what happened the night before. Molly has zero memory of any astral projecting, so whatever or whoever that was in the corner that night wasn't her. Fast forward to Molly's teenage years, somewhere between 15 and 17, and she's seeing shadow people all the time. But the scariest encounter happens when she's 17. She wakes up one night and instantly she's frozen with fear. Now, this isn't your typical sleep paralysis. She specifically remembers being able to turn her head to look at it. Standing there is this menacing black shadow, and she just knows in her gut that it's male. Then it speaks to her, words now burned into her memory. "We can't wait to get our hands on you." The words "we" and "our" stick out to her like a big red flag, like this thing isn't working alone, but represents some kind of dark collective. She just lies there, terrified, until she finally drifts back to sleep. As she gets older, these shadow people experiences start to fade away. And now, she hasn't seen them in years, but she still doesn't know what they wanted with her. And maybe that's the scariest part of all. This creepy event comes to us from Courtney. Back in 2009, Courtney is living with her boyfriend Josh in Louisiana because Josh, who I am proud to announce is now her husband, is stationed there with the Army. Every morning, he gets up to do his mandatory morning exercises, also known as PT or physical training. That's the fact, Jack! And always wears a gray Army t-shirt, shorts, and a reflection belt. He comes home afterward to shower and dress in his fatigues for the day. And this is his daily routine. One morning, Josh gets up and puts on his PT stuff and leaves. doesn't say anything to Courtney, which she doesn't necessarily find strange. Sometimes he's either pretty tired, or if he thinks that Courtney is asleep, he doesn't want to wake her up. 5 minutes later, tops, Courtney hears the front door open and Josh walks into the bedroom in his PT clothes. Courtney asks him why are you back so soon, but he doesn't answer. He just walks into the bathroom, turns the light on, and shuts the door. Now, this is not like Josh at all. Courtney calls his name a few times to try to get him to talk to her and tell her what the deal is. And she even gets up to go open the door until she hears the front door open. She hears boots walking through the house and then down the hallway. And Courtney calls out, "Josh?" and then jumps back into bed. Josh comes running into the bedroom in his fatigues. Courtney tries to tell him what happened. However, she's pretty sure he doesn't believe her. No one was in the bathroom, but the light was still on, even though they always turn it off. Josh says the front door was unlocked, which never happens. And that day, he didn't have PT, so he never even changed into his PT clothes. So who or what in the world did Courtney see and hear? When Vernon and his best friend, who we'll call Jason, were in high school, they loved urban exploring before urban exploring was a thing. They were always on a quest to find something creepy or paranormal. And guess what? They found it. Sometime around the year 2000, Vernon is 16 and has a curfew of 11 p.m. Jason is 18 and either doesn't have a curfew or his curfew is later than Vernon's. Either way, they always keep track of time so Vernon isn't late. It's a nice fall Friday or Saturday, and the two of them jump into Jason's truck and head to the movies. On the way back, they always take the back county roads, taking different roads each time, looking for anything cool or creepy. On this particular night, they decide to head for the Pin Oak Cemetery in Sims, Illinois. The church is gone, but there's still a single-lane road going down the middle of the gravestones. They pull onto the cemetery road and park the truck with the headlights shining in so they can see where they're walking down this lane that's only about 150 feet long. They walk the entire length of the road down and everything's fine. Nothing happens. Once they make it to the end and turn around to come back, they realize that the headlights on the truck were a bad idea. The lights are shining right in their eyes. They can't see anything but the black shadows from the gravestones on either side of them. About a third of the way back, they hear steps in the fall leaves covering the grass. Did you hear that? Yeah, I heard that. They both stop, only to hear a crunch, crunch, as if something takes 2 more steps after they stop. They start walking again, and after they've gone about another 30 feet, the sound of crunching footsteps returns. Again, the 2 boys stop, and the crunching stops. They start again, and the crunching footsteps start again. After about another 30 feet, they stop a 3rd time. But this time, whatever's behind them doesn't stop. It starts running. Both boys take off in a full-out sprint to the truck with whatever it is following close behind. They make it to the truck, start it up, and move the truck around a little bit to try to use the headlights as a searchlight to search the rest of the cemetery grounds. They don't see a thing. So, officially spooked, they decide it's time to head home. They've had enough adventuring for one night. As they leave the cemetery, they go down a small hill and pass a sign that says 1-lane bridge. The next thing Vernon knows, they're about 10 feet from his driveway and Jason is hitting the brakes because he's freaked out too. They both look at each other. How the hell do we get here? But the scariest part? Vernon is 2 hours late for his curfew. From that cemetery to his house in Sisney, Illinois, should have only taken them about 15 minutes. They lost 2 hours that night, and neither of them can remember anything after crossing that 1-lane bridge sign. Needless to say, after that night, Vernon and Jason officially hung up their Urban X tennies for good. In 2007 and 2008, Alex, a name I have given him to protect his identity, is stationed at a base in Ramadi, just west of Baghdad in Iraq. I am sure that tour of duty taught him a lot of valuable lessons about the world we live in. But the most important thing he learned is that not everything that walks this earth has been found. The never-ending sand hides monsters. One oppressively hot day, Alex finds himself standing at the gun turret in the lead Humvee of a patrol group with a .50 cal mounted right in front of him. These Humvees are just like the ones that you see on the streets, except where you would find a center console between the two front seats, these have a place for someone to stand to man the gun. Alex is pretty low on the totem pole, so he is not in the need to know of where they're going or what they're doing. All he knows is that without something over his face, the blowing desert sand makes it impossible to breathe. The sand there is not like the sugar beaches of Hawaii. It's more like flour, something the guys refer to as moon dust. Sand so fine that when you walk on it, it doesn't fall back into place like regular sand. It holds a perfect impression of your shoe. And it's everywhere. As the convoy moves through the completely featureless expanse of desert, they roll up on a huge herd of camels, like 500 or 1,000 of them. They slow to a stop about 100 feet back. They are going to be here a while. After an hour of watching the three herders trying to move the camels along, who don't seem to be in any real hurry, Alex is beyond relieved to finally see the end in sight. From the neck up, the sun and wind have completely dried him out, while everything below his neck is drenched with sweat. So his eyes fix on that last camel, knowing that as soon as that camel crosses the road, they can at least move again. But that last camel doesn't look right. It's trailing quite a bit from the rest of the herd and is kind of swaying side to side, almost falling over, like it's staggering out of an Oasis bar. Curious to see what the deal is with this camel, Alex grabs his M16 from behind him and looks through the scope at the camel. Looks like a normal camel, except it has stripes. Stripes? On a camel? Camels don't have stripes, but that's what he sees. It has 3 stripes on its side coming down from the top and 3 coming up from the bottom. As the camel is staggering around, it manages to turn around and start heading the other way, so Alex can now see the camel's other side. And he sees what he thought were stripes aren't stripes. They're legs, wrapped all the way around the camel's body from the other side. On the other side, those legs connect to a shiny jet black body. Not so much like a spider, but more like a crab. The body is like a rounded octagon, but flat, maybe only 4 to 6 inches thick. And all around that circumference, with the exception of where the 6 legs attach, is a row of what looks like black pearls that Alex can only guess are this thing's eyes. Now, to be sure, there is something called a camel spider. They do exist, and they look pretty dang creepy to me, but that is not what Alex is looking at. Not even close. Alex's lieutenant gets out of the Humvee and looks through his binoculars and evidently sees the same thing that Alex sees. He jumps back in the truck, smacks Alex's leg to get his attention and tells him, "Shoot that thing right now." Alex grabs the .50 cal, sights the camel, and fires 3 to 5 rounds at the camel. As his eyes scan the aftermath, a skin-crawling feeling hits him that remains with him to this day as he watches this thing detach itself from the camel and skitter away over a dune in a kind of a gallop with 3 legs in the front and 3 in the back. What? A .50 caliber bullet should have decimated this thing. Alex looks at the lieutenant, who just orders the convoy to start moving. As they pass the now deceased camel, he can see a perfect circle of missing flesh on the side of the camel where this creature had been attached, like it was eating the poor thing alive. He also sees a series of perfectly round 2-inch circles in the moon dust sand leading away from the camel in the same direction that the creature had fled. This was not a mirage. It was not some kind of hallucination from too much time in the sun. Once their mission for the day is accomplished, they return to base with nothing being said about what they saw. And Alex is fine with that, and he's pretty much been fine with keeping it quiet for the last 17 years. So just know that should you ever find yourself walking along the desert sands of the Middle East, there are monsters among you. This story takes us back to a small village in Serbia around 1920-ish, where Sue's great-grandmother Sophia is about to have an encounter that would send chills down the spines of generations to come. It all starts one night when Sophia and her husband are jolted awake by this clanging sound coming from their wood stove. Her husband gets up and flips on the light, but there's nothing there. And the moment he turns the light back off and crawls back into bed, you guessed it, the clanging starts right back up again. Night after night, this keeps happening. Finally, Sophia's had enough and decides to visit a fortune teller. Now, this woman doesn't sugarcoat anything. She tells Sophia straight up that someone's working black magic against her. But she's got a solution. Get some holy water from the church and walk around the house 3 times, sprinkling the holy water as she goes. This will send whatever it is right back to whoever sent it. But there's one crucial warning. If anyone calls her name while she's doing this ritual, she absolutely cannot answer. So there's Sophia, following these instructions to the letter. She's made it around twice and is working on that 3rd and final circle when she hears it. This stern male voice calling out, "Sophia!" Her first thought, her husband's trying to mess with her, and she nearly cusses him out right there. But that warning from the fortune teller flashes through her mind, so she keeps her mouth shut tight. When she's done, she goes looking for her husband, only to find out he's still working out in the fields and won't be home for hours. That night, first peaceful sleep they've had in ages. The next day, Sophia's out feeding the pigs right next to her neighbor's yard when she overhears something interesting. Her neighbor is talking to another village woman, saying she needs to go see a fortune teller herself. Turns out, the day before, this neighbor had been hanging laundry when she heard footsteps behind her. Thinking it was just one of her friends, she didn't even turn around. She just called out, "You go on into the house. I'll be there in a few minutes as soon as I'm done." When she finished the laundry and opened her door, there's this man standing there. Except he's not exactly a man. He's got horns reaching all the way up to the ceiling. They just stand there staring at each other until she slams that door shut and stays outside until her family comes home from the fields. When they finally get back, whatever that thing was, it's gone. After that day, Sophia watches as this neighbor's family gets hit with one stroke of bad luck after another. And let me tell you, the stories had such an impact that Sue, Sophia's great-great-granddaughter, won't go anywhere near any kind of magic to this day. And honestly, after hearing this story, can you blame her? Sophia Marks grew up in Aurora, Colorado. And you can't grow up in Aurora without hearing about a place called the Third Bridge. The Third Bridge is just this little nondescript overpass spanning the Kiowa Creek. And in this case, even calling it a creek is being pretty generous. This particular spot in the creek where the bridge goes over is supposed supposedly the location of a massacre of Native Americans, whose angry spirits still remain to haunt the bridge and are allegedly the source of many car accidents, claiming many lives. Sophia is the kind of person who wants to see things for herself before making any decision. So naturally, in the case of the third bridge, she wants to see it for herself before she decides if she's going to believe the hype. So it's Halloween night in 2015, and Sophia's in college. This would be the perfect night to go see a haunted bridge. Most of her friends politely decline what they consider a suicide mission, but her friends Sean and Ted are up for the challenge. The three head out just in time to be at the bridge at midnight. Now remember, this is Colorado at the end of October, which means
winter is coming.
Winter is coming. And this particular fall has been really cold, so there is snow and ice everywhere. Everything is frozen. From the moment they arrive and stop the car on the bridge, Sophia can feel a change in the air. She doesn't want to get out of the car. So even though it's cold, they all roll down their windows, looking and listening for anything that might prove whether the bridge is haunted or not. After a few minutes, Sophia says, "So, I guess it's all just a story. I mean, I'm not hearing anything other than running water." And Sean says, "You hearing running water? Everything is frozen." Ted says, "I'm hearing it too." And immediately, they all decide it's time to go. Sean starts the car, turns around, and heads back in the direction of the school as fast as he can. They start hearing more noises, like the place is coming to life. Sophia starts seeing all these transparent figures crossing the road in front of them, but she doesn't say anything. After about a half an hour of driving as fast as they dare, they are out of the area, and the 2015 Halloween ghost extravaganza seems to be over. They slow down, and Sophia tells the boys what she saw. Sean says, "I saw them too. I didn't want to say anything because I thought I was just so freaked out that I was seeing things." And Ted says, "I was hoping I was the only one who saw anything, but now you guys have just confirmed my greatest fear. We really did see ghosts." The rest of the ride is quiet. No one says a thing. They're too freaked out. Sophia never goes back there again, and she, Sean, and Ted never talk about it again. She lives in Texas now and hopes the ghosts don't find her. This in-betweener wants to remain anonymous, so we're going to call him Ryan. Ryan grows up in Crested Butte, Colorado, the baby of his family. As he gets older, he and his dad make it their routine to head out into the forest near their home. They've got this tradition of leaving treats, mainly apples, to draw in deer and elk so Ryan's cousins can experience what his dad calls the wonders of nature. This particular story takes place around 1986 or 87 when Ryan is about 17 years old. He goes out one day carrying this box of apples into the woods, something he does all the time. He loves finding these little out-of-the-way spots where the wildlife can find their treats while he watches from a distance. And sure, he knows there's always a chance it might attract predators, but that doesn't really bother him. They're not trying to keep any animals away or change the natural order of nature, just add a little extra now and then. That's exactly what he's thinking when he feels it. That unmistakable sensation of being watched. As he scans the tree line, he spots it. This massive humanoid form hanging back in the shadows, just observing. Now, Ryan's startled at first. Who wouldn't be? But something tells him this creature means no harm. He pulls out an apple, speaking in soft, gentle tones, inviting it to come closer, reassuring it that nobody's gonna hurt it. It finally steps into view. When I say that this thing is big, I mean big. Ryan's over 6 feet himself, but this thing is towering over him at what he figures is about 8 feet tall. standing there on two legs. It's got this human-like stature, but with this unmistakably simian build and muscle structure. Ryan knows exactly what or who he's looking at. He holds up an apple in offering, and the big guy's nervous at first, checking his surroundings like he's expecting trouble. Ryan assures him they're alone, and finally the Sasquatch reaches out and snags that apple right from his hand. And the way it devours that first apple, Ryan immediately offers another one. After a moment's hesitation, the Sasquatch takes it too. Ryan keeps talking to him softly, promising friendship and safety. As the creature relaxes, he actually reaches out, making this grunting sound. Ryan passes him two more apples, which disappear just as quickly as the first ones. Then the Sasquatch looks over his shoulder before turning back to Ryan, like he's got somewhere to be, but he doesn't want to look this gift horse in the mouth. So what does Ryan do? He offers up the whole box, telling his new friend he can take it, save it for later, or share it with others, whatever he wants. The Sasquatch gives him another grunt, grabs the box, and vanishes into the woods so fast it was like he was never there. Moral of the story? Just because something's bigger than us doesn't automatically make it a monster. Sometimes all it takes is an apple and a little kindness to prove it. I have no idea how to even categorize this encounter that comes to us from our good friend Edward. The events in the story actually happened to his Uncle Mike way back when the territory of New Mexico was not even a state in the Union yet, before World War II started for the U.S. Santa Fe was the capital of the territory, but not a real hustling and bustling place to live. So the kids would roam for a change of scenery to the Santa Fe mountains. Some would walk, some would ride horses, and some would be lucky enough to be able to use the family car. Uncle Mike is about 18 or 20 years old at the time when he and his wife-to-be, along with 3 other couples, decide to take a trip along the dark mountain roads of the mountains. They're out in the middle of nowhere with no light except for the car headlights and whatever light the moon happened to be giving off. And nothing but dirt roads winding through the pinyon trees and sage and wild grass. Now, everyone in that car was well aware of the legend of La Llorona, or the Crying Lady. She's been a part of the Southwest's Hispanic lore for forever. The tall, thin, beautiful spirit with long, flowing black hair wears a white gown and roams the rivers and the creeks, wailing over the loss of her children, which she herself drowned by tossing them into the river. So it's almost certain that all of the young adults in that car are thinking of and watching for the Crying Lady when they see something running out of the darkness straight toward their car. But it's not La Llorona. All of a sudden, 5 small men, for lack of a better term, come out of nowhere and jump on the car. Now, like Mike said, the light wasn't very good, but from what they see, these beings are faceless with clothes that are bulky and large on their little frames. Now, most cars and trucks of the time have running boards on the sides where a person can stand or sit, plus steel bumpers coming out of the front and the back of the car. One of the creatures jumps on the front bumper and one on the back, while the other 3 jump on the running boards. As they jump on the car, it's like they add 50 times their weight, and the car starts slowing down to a crawl no matter how hard Mike stomps on the gas. The engine is screaming at full power, but the car is barely moving. And while Mike may have been a little light on details when he told the story to Edward, I think it's fair to say that all the girls are probably screaming. I bet the guys are too. Mike doesn't say how long this encounter lasts, but just as quick as they appear, all the little whatever they are jump off all at once and disappear into the night, making no noise and never saying a word. they just disappear. And as they disappear, so does all that force or weight that's slowing down the car. So Mike, who has the gas pedal to the floor, quickly lets off the gas as the car lurches forward, finally free of that force keeping them at bay. Everybody is pretty freaked out, to say the least, but they all get back home with no further incident. Is this a paranormal incident or the act of a few men playing a trick on some kids out on a joyride in the mountains? But how weird is it that these 5 pint-sized beings had enough weight to slow down a car to a crawl? That they were faceless and wore clothes either not made for them or made style choices heretofore unknown on this planet. To this day, no one knows who or what they were. This interesting little story comes from InBetweeners superfan Steven about an encounter he and his wife Melissa have near the Island Creek area of Pikeville, Kentucky, just a couple of years ago. They have a whole bunch of dogs. So one day they're out on a trail, walking the dogs like maybe 10 minutes out from the back of their house. And they're cruising along, and all of a sudden, the dogs stop. Now, they've gotten pretty good at reading their dogs. The dogs have done a really good job in the past of alerting them to, like, copperheads or other kinds of snakes or whatever. So as they're walking, the dogs key on something, they pay attention. The dogs are in front of them and they turn themselves sideways. So it's like they're blocking their people from going any further. Steven is looking out and he doesn't see anything that would be a problem. So he kind of kneels down to get kind of on the same eye line as the dogs, trying to see what it is that they see. He's looking into the trees and he sees a tree right on the edge of the tree line. It's only like a couple inches around at its widest. So obviously the branches coming off are pretty thin, like maybe the size of your finger. Steven sees one of those thin branches kind of pulled down, like there's a weight on it. Something is pulling that branch down. He's trying to calculate what is happening in his head when he sees a shimmer in the area around the branch, only a couple of feet off the ground, so short. But a shimmer like the predator cloaking shimmer, or like the shimmer of a heat wave. And as soon as he sees this, he tells his wife, "Get back to the house," and he stands up. Those two actions together, he said, it's almost like it clued whatever this thing is into the fact that it was now busted, that it's been seen. And he says it disappeared in a millisecond. Not like it poofed away in a magic cloud, but more like it went so fast that it just disappeared. Melissa didn't see the shimmer, but she actually saw the branch come back into its regular resting position after whatever it was let go of the branch and sped away. Steven has no idea what that was, but he and Melissa both will tell you something was in those woods. It's November 2007, and Bradley, his wife, and his son Alex are living in Tyler, Texas. And they've been living in their new house for a few months now, and they just passed Alex's 4th birthday. Bradley gets up super early for work, so he goes to bed early. But Alex has been having trouble sleeping lately, so Bradley's wife has been going to bed with him to keep him company. As he does every day, Bradley wakes up at 4 a.m. and gets dressed for work. Then he goes through the kitchen and down the hall past Alex's bedroom where his wife and Alex are sleeping and keeps going to his office. He turns on his computer, checks his emails, and kills some time until it's time to leave for work at 4:30. Usually, he goes out the garage door, but that makes a lot of noise. So on this particular morning, he changes his mind and decides to go out the front door. It's dark and chilly out, so he doesn't waste any time getting into his 4-door desert sand-colored Saturn and starting the engine. Unfortunately, The transmission is messed up and the car doesn't go in reverse. So he keeps his left foot hanging out of the door and uses his foot to push the car back out of the driveway and into the street. Once the car hits the street, he keeps pushing until he has enough room, turns the wheel to the right, and as he starts moving forward, watches as his headlights sweep across his yard, the neighbor's yard, and onto their walkway. And just so you know, this map we're showing comes straight from Bradley himself. So he watches the headlights sweep across the yard, and in the headlights, he sees a little boy standing on his neighbor's walkway, dressed only in his underwear, sucking on a sippy cup. And Brad's first thought is, dang it, now I'm going to be late for work because it's dark and it's cold outside, like 40 degrees, and he knows he has to go get this kid, call the police, and make sure he gets back to where he belongs. Bradley pulls the car back into the driveway, shuts it off, gets out, and starts walking towards the boy. And as he gets closer, he can see it's Alex. He quickly grabs Alex up, hurries back to his front door, fishes his keys out of his pocket, and unlocks the door. He rushes inside, yelling for his wife, "Honey, I just found Alex outside. I don't know how he got out or how long he's been out there," as he goes down the hallway toward Alex's room. He flings the door to his room open, and there is his wife, sound asleep. And next to her is Alex. In a fraction of a second, Bradley's brain is trying to process the thought, if Alex is sleeping, who am I holding? He looks at the boy he has in his arms, and the boy's eyes are solid black. The next thing Bradley knows, he's back in bed like he's just waking up, but he's already fully dressed for work except his shoes. He glances at the clock, 4:45, and he thinks, what the hell just happened in the last 15 minutes? He grabs his keys, throws his shoes on his feet, and runs through the kitchen again. And this time, he pushes open the door to Alex's room. And there they are, Alex and his mom, just like they were a minute ago, sound asleep right next to each other. Bradley is now running late, so he rushes out the front door again, takes a quick look around for anything that looks out of place, that shouldn't be there. But everything looks completely normal. He gets into the car, unfortunately not thinking to check if the car is still warm. He hurries off to work, getting there about 5 or 10 minutes late, tells the manager what happened. His manager just says, that's a pretty weird dream. But Bradley knows it wasn't just a dream, because just a week later, behind the printer in his office, Bradley finds the black-eyed boy's sippy cup. Nisha Marie Beliveau is born in New Brunswick, Canada, into a military family. And like most military families, that means they move a lot. Just after Nisha finishes kindergarten, her family moves to Lahr, Germany. Their new home in Germany isn't too bad. It's this massive white apartment building and pretty much a kid's paradise with tons of other kids her age and parks scattered everywhere. The only non-kid-friendly thing about the place are these fenced-off areas of man-made ponds and waterways, all part of the water treatment system coming off the Rhine River. These ponds are surrounded by overgrown cattails and grass, like something out of a storybook. Nisha remembers watching dragonflies and butterflies dancing over the water, thinking it looks just like a fairy tale pond. But both her parents are crystal clear about one thing: stay away from those ponds and don't even think about climbing those fences. One kid had already drowned there already after doing just that. One winter day, when Nisha's about 6 or 7, she's walking to school by herself, taking this path that's fenced on both sides, when she sees a hole cut in the chain link fence, held open with some makeshift bungee cord. She figures it must be the work of teenagers because no kid her age could slice through that thick metal. There's this "stay out, no trespassing" sign, half torn off, swinging in the wind. Through this makeshift doorway, she sees some of her school friends out on the frozen pond playing hockey. Now, she knows these kids pretty well, and she can't help feeling a little left out seeing them having fun without her. So she squeezes through that hole and ventures out onto the ice, making her way through the crowd, exchanging hellos and fist bumps. And that's when they hear it. This ungodly cracking sound, like thunder beneath their feet. Before anyone can think, Nisha plunges through the ice. She bobs back up quick enough, but her snowsuit, book bag, gloves, and winter boots are weighing her down like anchors. She's desperately trying to pull herself out of this jagged ice hole while her friends, panicked out of their minds, bolt to go get help. Just like that, she's alone, clinging to the sharp edges of the ice. She treads water for what feels like forever, the horrible realization sinking in that she's not getting out of this on her own, and she can't hang on much longer. And she thinks, this is it. This is how I go. As the icy water washes over her face and she watches her gloved hand slip from the edge, this strange sense of calm washes over her. The next thing Nisha knows, she's sitting on a cement barrier, completely out of the water, staring at 3 teenagers, 2 girls and a boy. They're helping her wring out her hat, gloves, and boot inserts, getting her coat and stuff back on. She's safe, practically dry, but confused and dazed. Who are these people? Where did they come from? Only one of them speaks. The blonde girl with the most striking eyes Nisha has ever seen, almost like a Siberian husky. The girl smiles at her and says, "Go home, Nisha, and don't lie to your mom about what happened. It's important to tell her the truth. Go home, little one, go." Nisha feels this overwhelming warmth in her blood and an inexplicable urge to do exactly what this teenager says. She jumps up and starts running toward home when this thought hits her like a brick. Wait a minute, how do they know her name? She's never met these people before. She whips around to look back at them, but all she sees are her own footprints in the snow. Where are the teenagers that were just there? Confused, freezing, and still slightly wet, Nisha just turns around and runs for home. The moment she walks into the apartment building, her mother takes one look at her crying, wet daughter and knows exactly what happened. A few days later, her father comes home and tells her mom that despite all of his military resources, they can't identify or track down these 3 teens so they can reward them for saving their daughter's life. The only theory they can come up with is that they must have been grifters who moved on to the next town. Her mother insists they were angels. Her father sticks to the grifter theory. But here's the thing, they lived in a very close-knit military community where everybody knows everybody. Yet no one finds these mysterious teenagers or figures out who they were. But Nisha, she's got her own theory. She believes it was the Rhine River water nymph from German folklore who saved her that day. And to this day, she leaves offerings by the water every full moon as a sign of respect and appreciation. After all, she owes this being her very life. Ken is about as far from a city slicker as you can get.
That's right.
He grew up on a ranch/farm in a very rural area of Louisiana and has hunted and fished his entire life. He is a pretty big dude at 6'8" and over 300 pounds. So it's not a big surprise that he's the guy who's tapped to work with the cattle and the horses. So he has a lot of experience dealing with large animals. In his 20s, Ken moves to Texas, where he has a ranch close to 100 acres next to the Texas-Louisiana line and the Sabine River bottoms. After working his ranch for about a year, he starts having some issues with coyotes and wild hogs. So a few nights a week, he goes out either by himself or with his neighbor that owns hog dogs, and they do their best to thin out the hogs. One night, Ken goes out on his own to his normal spot, right on a tree line that overlooks a field, and sets up his game call, which is basically a speaker that plays a high-pitched, injured rabbit sound. That's like music to the ears of any local predators. He plays the call, waits for a while, and nothing's moving. Odd, considering that everything from bobcats to raccoons usually come running thinking they're getting a free meal. And in the quiet, he gets a funny feeling, but he doesn't see anything. So he stays there for a while, even though nothing is moving around, until he finally decides to pack it up and head back to the house. He's got to get to bed so he can get up early to take a buddy fishing on a lake on the ranch the next morning. Next morning, Ken and his buddy are driving towards the lake, which is right on the same road he took to the spot he was hunting the night before. Once they get about 100 feet past his hunting spot, they see a dead hog on the ground. It is about 200 pounds and is just crushed. And the trees next to it are splattered with blood and have a bunch of bark knocked off. Something picked up this hog and bashed it against the tree trunks. Ken can't help but think about that funny feeling he got the night before and has no idea what animal can grab a hog and slam it into a tree like that. Like I said, Ken is a big dude, and he says even he can't come close to doing something like that. So the question is, did he interrupt something when he got there for his hunt? Or did something happen while he was playing the loud call? Or maybe something went nuts because of the game call. Ken has no idea, but either way, he gets the feeling that it's all tied together with that weird feeling he had. A year later, Ken is watching an episode of a show called These Woods Are Haunted that is featuring the encounter story of a deer hunter named Mike Woolley, who's chased out of the woods near Keachai, Louisiana, by a couple of aggressive Bigfoot. And the light goes on in Ken's head. That's only about 5 miles away from his ranch. Well, that's a rabbit hole that Ken dives into head first and finds a ton of stories and sightings in that area, which also just happens to be due south of the infamous Fouke monster sightings in Fouke, Arkansas. So Ken's new theory is that the whole area from where Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and Louisiana meet, all the way south to the Toledo Bend area, is a very sparsely populated and undeveloped, which would be a perfect highway for whatever it is that's out there. Ken still goes hunting at night, but he has upgraded his weapons to something with a little more stopping power. But he still swears it's going to take a next level kind of encounter to keep him out of the woods. Spring of 2008, Norman, Oklahoma. Christy finds herself at 2:30 a.m. needing one of those random things that you need on occasion. Dang it. I gotta run to Walmart. She does, and by 3 a.m. she's already back in her car to go home. She picks up her iPod and starts scrolling through to decide what to listen to on the way home, and she stops. She's being watched. She can just feel it. Looking around, she spots the source immediately. A dark green Chevy Malibu just one spot away in the parking lot. In the driver's seat is a man in his mid-20s staring at her, not blinking, not trying to hide it, and certainly creepy. He has shaggy black hair down to his shoulders, olive skin, and eyes that are completely wrong. Like they're too big with not enough definition between the iris and the pupil. Now, you have to understand one thing about Christy. She doesn't scare easily. Ever since she learned to drive, she's had a passion for fixing and racing cars. While the street racing scene in Norman was pretty much dominated by the boys, she spent many a mile on the back roads of Cleveland County perfecting not only her driving skills, but her nerves of steel. So while being alone in a desolate Walmart parking lot at 3 a.m. with a weirdo stalker 10 feet away is certainly enough to scare me, for Christy, that's not it. Christy is slightly, shall we say, sensitive. And this guy scares the crap out of her. His eyes have absolutely no sign of emotion or anything else for that matter. Just a void of nothingness, like he's not even human. And her extra intuition tells her he's not. After Christy manages to break her deer in the headlights fixation and tries to act normal, she hopes that he can't see her hands shaking or her doors locking as she pretends his presence isn't a thing and she's just going back to whatever she was doing. She starts her car, a 1999 Dodge Neon, and heads for the parking lot exit, praying he won't follow, but knowing that he will. And she's right. The green sedan is right behind her as she pulls out onto the service road and up to the stoplight on Main Street. The light turns green and Christy makes a left onto Main Street with the green sedan right behind her. Coincidence, right? Until the green car starts speeding up, closing the gap between them and flashing his lights. Yep, she's being followed. Now, she starts to panic. She speeds up. So does he. She changes lanes. So does he. As they continue this cat and mouse game down Main Street, the green sedan is continually riding her bumper and flashing its lights. She has no idea what this guy wants or what he's trying to do. She only knows one thing. She ain't stopping. As Main Street changes to a one-way street, the green sedan moves from behind her to the new lane that has just opened on her left. He speeds up until he is right next to Christy. She looks over to see him still staring at her, unblinking, not ever once taking his eyes off of her, even to watch the road. And as if that's not bad enough, Christy also realizes that there's not one single other car on the road. Being this close to the police station, there are almost always cops driving the street at night. But not tonight. It's like they've drifted into this alternate reality. At this point, Christy's main focus becomes getting to the police station, which is only a few blocks away. That is her new target. Problem is, it's a left turn and this guy is pacing her on her left. She downshifts and steps on it, gains enough distance in front of him that she's able to pull the emergency brake and drift her way through the left turn in front of him. I know, sounds like an episode of Fast and Furious, right? But remember, racing cars was her idea of a good time. She keeps going until she pulls up right in front of the front doors of the Norman police station, just in time to see the green sedan roll on by without following her into the parking lot. However, the road the sedan is driving down ends at the end of that block with a T, with a fairly steep incline to railroad tracks running parallel to the road. Straight is not really an option. So he either has to go right, left, turn around and head back past the station again, or stop the car and wait for her. Christy watches both sides of the T and the road next to the station for over 10 minutes and does not see him turn off the road or double back. When she finally gets her nerve back, she drives all around the police parking lot and the road surrounding it. No green sedan. It's like it's totally vanished. Blowing her mind even further is the realization that through this entire car chase, that guy's car never made a sound. No engine revving, no tires screeching, no anything. Between the car chase and the mental recounting of this wholly unnatural affair, Christy wisely calls her boyfriend M, who we're going to call Mitch, and says, "Can I come over?" Once she gets there, she tells Mitch the whole story and watches his face change from a look of concern to a look of guilt. She hadn't even gotten to the part about what the guy looked like, so she's a little surprised when he asks her if the guy had shaggy black hair and weird eyes. Yes? How did you know? Turns out Mitch has his own story to tell. Apparently, when he was younger, Mitch did a little dabbling in the dark arts and became bonded to a demon named Azazel, who always presents himself as a Hispanic-looking man with shaggy black hair and black, weird eyes. And even though Mitch doesn't practice black magic anymore, Azazel still looks out for him. Mitch's theory is that Christy's stalker is Azazel checking her out because she has been hanging out with Mitch. It's been years since Christy and Mitch have been together, but Christy thinks Azazel might just have taken a liking to her too, as she still sees signs of his presence occasionally, like the tag of her teabag fluttering on its own as she's writing this story to share with the rest of us InBetweeners. This encounter comes from someone who wishes to remain anonymous because so far, the reaction he's received from the few family and friends he has confided in has not been stellar. So we're just going to call him Jim. It's early spring of 1977 in Comstock, Michigan, and Jim's only about 10 years old. Jim's cousin Mike is a hunter and a trapper, and on this particular day, Jim and another cousin, Steve, they're going to go with Mike into the woods just down the street from Uncle Raymond's house to collect the last of Mike's traps. They all walk into the woods, only 150 to 200 yards, when they run into these two guys that have started a marijuana patch. Must have been a pretty good patch because these guys are not messing around. One of them grabs Mike from behind, puts a knife to his throat, while the other guys start harassing Jim and Steve. But the chaos stops on a dime when they all notice they're being watched by a dog standing on a dirt mound. But this is no ordinary dog. This dog is about 7 feet tall, with a pretty beefy build covered in bluish black and silver fur. And most memorably for Jim, giving off this intense smell of musk and decay. They are all looking at the dried blood covering its face, chest, and both arms to about its elbows. But it is looking at the bullies. Its eyes are a golden color with an intense focus on the two bullies. As it stares them down, it lets out this primeval, guttural growl as saliva starts dripping from its mouth. The two bullies freak out, push Jim, Mike, and Steve to the ground, and take off running. Mike and Steve get up and start running for home, but Jim is petrified and just stands there, frozen in fear. The dogman looks right at him, but with a very different, softer look in its eyes. And Jim can feel his panic draining away and a sense of calm taking its place. He is completely in awe. The dogman turns from Jim and takes off in the same direction that the two bullies did, popping Jim out of his awe bubble, and he also starts running for home. 47 years later, Jim and his cousins have still never talked about what happened, but Jim can still see it in his mind as if it happened yesterday. He can still smell that acrid smell. And to this day, every time he gets a whiff of something dead, he relives his encounter with the dogman all over again. This tale comes to us from our good friend Deb. Back around 2014, Deb checked herself into the Swedish hospital in Seattle, Washington for major back surgery. It's a huge hospital that covers several city blocks, and Deb's ICU unit was in the oldest building. So old that parts of it were shut down and locked up since it is so outdated. Her daughter Katie goes with her and helps her settle into her assigned suite in the ICU. Now, that particular ICU unit was built as an octagon with a large nurses' station in the center. And every room and hallway has several cameras monitoring everything that happens anywhere in the unit. The surgery goes just fine. And the day after, Deb and Katie are still exhausted, not only from the surgery, but just from the travel to get there. So Deb tells Katie she's going to take a nap, and Katie decides to do the same. Deb closes her eyes to try to get some rest, and about half an hour later, she hears little feet come into her room. Deb opens her eyes only to see a little blonde boy, roughly 4 to 5 years old, with freckles and his 2 front teeth missing. She reaches out her hand towards him and asks, "Are you lost? Do you need any help?" The little boy's face turns mean, and then he bites her. Alrighty then. Deb dozes off shortly afterward. Hours later, she wakes up, and as the nurse comes into the room to take her vitals, she tells Katie about this dream that she had where this little boy came into the room and bit her. When Deb finishes telling Katie the dream, Katie's eyes get huge. "Mom, if it was a dream, then why do you have a bite mark on your arm?" Needless to say, Deb's a little freaked. But there it is, a tiny bite mark with 2 missing teeth. The nurse and Katie check the bed thoroughly just to make sure that there isn't anything that can make that distinct mark. But no, there's nothing. Her nurse is even more freaked out and says, "Hang on a sec, I'm going to go check the security video." The nurse needs to make sure that there isn't a little boy running loose in the ICU. While she's gone, the surgeon comes in to tell Deb how the surgery went, etc. When the nurse returns, she tells them that she checked out the security footage, and she can see Deb open her eyes, start talking, reach her arm out, and then yank it back in panic. But she does not see anyone there with her. Deb's surgeon says, "Oh yeah, for sure this hospital is haunted." And he goes on to say that there are several reports of people seeing nurses dressed in old-fashioned uniforms, and that he himself has even heard screams coming from empty and no longer used operating rooms on several occasions. Needless to say, Deb could not wait to leave that hospital. That bite mark was there for 10 days. She even had a picture of it, but over the years, she lost it. But she's okay with that. She has Katie, the doctor, and the nurse as witnesses. And the picture really creeped her out anyway. She's just thankful that he only bit her and didn't follow her home. She will never forget that mean little face. This story comes from an InBetweener named Paul, who has a story shared to him by his grandmother. For this story, we're going to call her Olive. Olive used to work at the Tower of London back in the 1940s during World War II. She never told Paul what her duties were there, but every now and then her job would require her to stay in a staff apartment on the grounds of the tower. As I'm sure most of you know, the Tower of London, with its long and checkered past, is full of ghost stories and is known to be a very haunted place. And Olive had the stories to prove it. But one story in particular captured Paul's attention. It involved a man she knew who worked as a yeoman warder, better known as the Beef Eaters. The yeoman warders are the ceremonial guarders of the tower. But back in the day, they were the personal guards to Henry VIII, who allowed them to eat as much beef as they wanted from the king's table. Thus, the Beef Eaters. Fast forward to World War II, when anyone of fighting age is off on a front somewhere, the Beef Eaters step up for more actual guard duty, which is fine since you actually have to have a pretty long and successful career in the British Armed Forces before you can even become one. So it's not like these guys are rookies. So this particular night, Olive is outside her staff apartment having a smoke when she sees one of the Beef Eaters that she sees every day, let's call him George, walking by with a limp and a look of shock on his face. She says, "Why, George, come and sit down. "You look like you need a rest and a cup of tea." To which George immediately responds, "I could absolutely murder a cup of tea right now." She asks him what happened, and this is what he tells her. George is doing his rounds on the tower grounds and was walking through the halls of the White Tower. Now, just so you know, the Tower of London's not just a tower, but a whole compound made of several buildings and towers. The White Tower is the big building right in the center. So George has been making the rounds over the whole complex, and his blistered feet are killing him. So when he gets inside the White Tower building, he takes a seat at the bottom of a stone spiral staircase to just rest and take his shoes off for a quick minute. The rest of the room was nothing but shadows. Creepy, but George is no stranger to the stranger side of the tower. So he's really not all that surprised when that familiar feeling of not being alone in the room hits him. From the shadows, he could hear the very quiet voices of two young boys laughing, maybe even at him, when directly into his left ear he hears,
"There's only you and I here."
He turns his head and his flashlight to the left, but there's nothing there. Then in his right ear he hears,
"No, there's only you and I here."
He pulls his socks back on and yells at the top of his lungs in his loud Cockney accent,
"As soon as I get me blading shoes back on, there'll only be you here."
Ghost encounters in the towers are not all that rare, but this one made Olive laugh. Until the day she read the story of the two princes. Brief history. On April 9th, 1483, Edward IV dies. His two young boys, Edward V and his little brother Richard of Shrewsbury, ages 12 and 10 respectively, are the next in line to the throne. However, Edward IV did not pick well when he chose his brother Richard as the protector of the boys. They don't even make it to the coronation 2 months later, with charges that their claim to the throne is illegitimate. But their uncle does and becomes King Richard III. The children are sent to live in the tower and are never seen again. But in 1674, a worker repairing the floor at the base of a set of stairs in the White Tower finds under the stonework the skeletal remains of two young boys. The rumor was true. Richard III had hired men to murder the children in their sleep in order to secure his claim to the throne. That staircase spot that George had chosen to take a little rest was the exact spot that the two princes had once been resting. This horror movie scene comes to us from Jay. His encounter happened just a few weeks ago at the beginning of December in 2023. Jay is living a nice, quiet life in Northern Ontario and assumes this is the way it's going to stay. But Jay is wrong. It's the second week of deer season and Jay is up, coffeed, and ready to go. He cocks his crossbow and heads to the run. It's 5 a.m. Sky's clear and the air brisk. He had a trail cam set up that had shown him all the bucks that would visit along with the raccoons and mink and other critters. It's gonna be a good day, he thinks, as he heads toward the blind that he already has set up in that spot. Sitting in the dark blind, Jay feels a bit uneasy, which is odd since he's been here every day this week and everything had felt fine. But here it was. Every sound thrills him. He hears leaves rustling in the slight breeze as he just settles in, his gaze fixed on the 7x5 blind window in front of him. After checking his equipment, Jay suddenly becomes aware of the deafening silence around him. No wind. Even the sound from the deer mouse that lives under his blind is eerily absent. The birds had ceased their tattletale screeches, warning that a hunter's in the area. Absolute silence. Then it happened. A sound that both puzzled him and terrified him all at once danced on the air. Jay leans forward toward the blind window, trying to understand and identify this new sound. But this is something that he's never heard before, except that it's oddly still familiar. Jay's brain scrambles, trying to figure out why this sound is so familiar, even though he knows he has never heard it in the forest before. When the answer pops right into his head. And when it does, Jay thinks, no way. Yet, here it is. And just what is that sound, you ask? The sound of the creature from the Predator movie. That's the only sound he can equate it to. Clicks that rise and fall in clusters with that odd cadence. And he's thinking what you're thinking. No way! His mind starts running over the catalog in his head of the forest sounds he knows and has heard before. Raccoons and woodpeckers and every small creature he can think of. But nothing in nature sounds at all like this. As the sun begins to rise, the disturbing silence continues. Nothing is moving. The trail cams had shown the times almost like clockwork when the deer made their rounds. So Jay waits and waits. But they don't show. Nothing shows. 5 hours pass and not even a bird appears at the feed pile. The only sound he hears? Sporadic clusters of clicking. Then, out of the blue, Jay hears a crack and looks straight ahead at his 12 o'clock where he sees a 2-inch tree suddenly bend and then break about 3 feet off the ground. Nothing around it. It just bends and breaks. He saw no shimmer, no being, and no reason for the tree to bend. Jay thinks for a moment, packs up, and heads back to camp. Funny thing is, no one in his hunting group saw another deer in the area the entire rest of the week. Not on the trail cams, not even tracks, in an area that was full of deer before this happened. Jay doesn't know of anything in nature that sounds like what he heard. He sat and watched that tree bend. He watched it break, and whatever it was that pushed it over and broke it was, at least to Jay's eyes, completely invisible. Well, Jay says that's what happened, and he doesn't have an answer for it. There is no sighting, no easy explanation. So, does anyone else have any ideas of what Jay saw or didn't see? Every parent thinks their kids are special, and they are. But there are some children that are more special than others. And whether that's a physical handicap or an IQ off the charts, these children often pose unique parenting challenges. Hope and her husband Will live in Mississippi with their 4 kids. But their oldest child, who we're going to call Tommy, has proven to be one of those extra special children. Now, life is pretty normal until Tommy's about 3 years old. Hope and her husband had a set of twins about 6 months earlier that understandably take up a lot of their time. So when they take a vacation to the beach with Grandma and Grandpa, and on their first night there, have the chance to leave the twins with them and take Tommy to the beach to spend some quality time with just him, they jump at it. The 3 of them get to the beach and have a great time playing in the sand, playing in the water. Tommy is having a heyday. But the very next morning, Tommy doesn't want to go back. He's convinced that there are alligators in the water. Well, everybody brushes it off as the tantrums of a 3-year-old and go back to the beach anyway. But when they get there, Tommy won't go anywhere near the water. Dad and Grandpa take the twins into the water, and no sooner do they even hit the water line when Tommy freaks out. But the twins are loving it. And as they're all having fun in the waves, a man comes running down the beach, yelling at Dad and Grandpa to get out of the water. Turns out this guy's been fishing on the pier and from above can see this alligator swimming back and forth like it's stalking them. Animal control comes out and removes the alligator, but How did Tommy know the night before that it was going to be there the next day? He's 3. A while later, Hope is getting ready to go outside and work on her flower beds. Before she goes out, Tommy comes to her and says she can't go out to see her flowers because a snake is going to bite her. So Hope says, "Don't worry, honey. I'm not going to get bitten by a snake, but I promise I'll be extra careful." She goes out to her flower beds and starts pulling weeds and is a little surprised to find a rattlesnake under her hydrangeas. She backs away and goes back into the house, where Tommy is all too happy to tell her that she was wrong. A few months after that hair-raising experience, Hope and her husband decide to surprise Tommy with a trip to Grandma and Grandpa's. They don't say anything to him that would spoil the surprise, and Tommy's even sleeping when they put him in the car. About 10 minutes into the trip, Tommy wakes up and tells them, "You can't go this way to Grandma's house. The bridge is broken." So they tell Tommy, "I'm sure the bridge is fine. But how did you know we were going to Grandma's?" Tommy says, "I had a dream." As they approach the bridge, Tommy's dad slows the car, and he and Hope can see that on the far end of the bridge, it looks like it's crumbling. Hope's cousin happens to be the county supervisor, so she gets on the phone to let him know there's a problem. And within 20 minutes, the whole thing is shut down and detour signs are posted. In 2018, Hope and her husband have been trying for a while to have another baby. Tommy, who's around 5 at this point, wakes up and tells Hope that he's sad he's never going to see his baby sister. Hope doesn't even find out she's pregnant for another week, but their joy turns to heartbreak when Hope has a miscarriage. And while she can't say for sure that the child was a girl, Tommy's words stay with her. And Tommy, who's now 11, still says he wishes his baby sister were here. And while Hope says Tommy doesn't really call out specifics anymore, he still has a rock-solid intuition. One day, he brings one of his little brothers to her and says, "You better check him. Something's about to happen." And he walks away. Less than 5 minutes later, the little brother has a seizure. And while this special ability that Tommy has doesn't really have much of a bearing on their day-to-day life, it is hard for Hope to argue when Tommy says he's right. Tucked away in Dumfries, Scotland, is a place called the Crichton, which is a former Victorian era psychiatric complex. Now, before your mind wanders to all those horror movie cliches, let me tell you, this place is nothing like what's in your head. It's actually a peaceful campus, part of the local university, with beautiful Victorian houses built of soft red sandstone, complete with stunning gardens, sprawling lawns, and this magnificent cathedral-style church right at its heart. Marcia works there as a night patrol security manager. Part of her job includes driving around the complex several times each night, windows down, listening for any alarm systems that might go off. Sounds insanely creepy to me, but Marcia says it's totally fine. Now, the abandoned care home and former World War II air base that she also has to patrol, that's a whole different story for another time. But back to the Crichton. One bitter cold December night in 2017, Marcia hears an alarm activate at Solway House. And if she has to pick the creepiest building on campus, this one would be it. She drives over to the building and goes in, but everything looks okay. So she takes a closer look at the motion detector, and there is the culprit, a huge spider taking a midnight stroll across the motion detector. Ugh, now I have to write up a whole report for a spider. So Marcia takes a seat at the bottom of the staircase and starts writing. That's when she hears it. Now, we're not talking about those little taps you see people freaking out about on ghost hunting shows. No, this is more like someone's upstairs throwing boxes around and rearranging furniture at 3 a.m. Keep in mind that this building is now used for art classes and music lessons, so it's not like there's anything in here to steal. But heeding the call of duty, Marcia jumps up and heads upstairs, all the lights blazing. Unfortunately, the only weapon she has is her flashlight, because in Scotland, they can't even carry mace. Are they supposed to sweet-talk criminals into submission? So she's got herself the biggest, sturdiest torch she can get. According to Marcia, this thing could probably stun a dogman. So she runs up the stairs, and the moment she reaches the top, everything goes silent. But somebody's got to be there, right? So she searches every single room, every cupboard, every toilet. Nothing. Despite all that racket she heard, everything's perfectly in place. Not a single thing disturbed. All the windows are locked tight. Plus, there's absolutely no wind outside, so it's certainly not rattling windows. Satisfied that nobody's there, she heads back downstairs to finish her paperwork. But the second she sits back down, the whole thing starts up again. Marcia lets out a word that's definitely not suitable for polite company, grabs her monster flashlight, and sprints back up the stairs. And just like before, the moment she hits that top step, dead silence. She does another thorough sweep, checking every nook and cranny, but everything's exactly as it should be. The funny thing is, the idea of a ghost hasn't even popped into her head yet. She's been working this job long enough that the Crichton has never once given her the creeps. It's always been a peaceful place. Until now. She heads back downstairs one more time, and that's when it happens. This cold, static electricity starts crawling across her skin. Now, Marcia's no stranger to the paranormal. She's had her fair share of experiences, and this sensation, it's like a big red warning light. Then she feels it. Something right behind her, following her down those stairs. And notice I said something, not someone. Because whatever this is, doesn't feel human, doesn't feel like a spirit, doesn't feel friendly. It feels all wrong, all kinds of wrong. The only thought running through Marcia's head is, don't let it know that you know it's there. Don't let it know you're scared. Though of course she is. Who wouldn't be? Having watched enough paranormal shows to know the drill, she starts reciting the prayer to the Archangel Michael in her head. Mind you, she's not even Catholic, but when things get dicey, you pull out all the stops. The moment she hits that bottom step, the feeling vanishes. She finishes up her paperwork, and wouldn't you know it, that banging and crashing starts right back up again. Well, Marcia's had enough. She plants herself at the bottom of those stairs and shouts, I am too busy for your nonsense. I'm leaving now, so knock yourself out. With that, she locks up and drives off into the night. Back at the office, she starts telling her colleague, I had an alarm at Solway House. It was weird, but he cuts her off mid-sentence. I meant to tell you, Solway House is haunted as to this day. It remains Marcia's #1 paranormal experience, which, considering Marcia's own house in Dumfries, built back in 1870, seems to have an innocuous spirit or two hanging around. But she says she would never dream of asking them to leave. That would just be rude. After all, they were there first. This encounter comes from InBetweener, Wise Woman Healing, otherwise known as Melissa. When Melissa was a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, her dad was in the Navy, meaning he was gone a lot, making her mom basically a single parent left to deal with the ups and downs of raising a child on her own. And like lots of young kids, Melissa sometimes has nightmares. No big deal. Mom always comes in and makes things better. This one night, shortly after her dad had come home, Melissa has a really bad dream and wakes up as usual. But this time, as Melissa sits up and opens her eyes, she sees her mom standing by the wall next to her dresser. Well, that's weird. And she thinks, why is Mom just standing there and not coming over to my bed or saying anything? Melissa can see her, plain as day, wearing her normal fuzzy blue robe that makes her look like Cookie Monster, her usual pink hair rollers in her hair, and her glasses. But Melissa can feel that something isn't right. This is not her mother. So she starts screaming at the top of her lungs. Her mom and dad come running into her room, and her mom tries to calm her down, but Melissa keeps screaming. It's right there! It's right there! As she points to the side of the dresser, where by now the not mom is crouching down with a look of terror on her face as well. Good! Her mom looks at the dresser and says, "Honey, there's nothing there." By now, Dad, who's brand new to this whole kids having nightmares thing, is standing there wondering what in the hell is going on. So he starts screaming too, because it just seems to be like the right thing to do. Eventually, doppelganger mom fades away and Melissa calms down. And this may all have happened about 51 years ago, but Melissa remembers it as if it happened just yesterday. This next odd encounter comes from an in-betweener who is still very much afraid of being labeled as crazy. So we're going to change her name to Maria. Maria's experience happens in 1988 in Moreno Valley, California. She and her husband have 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl. But Friday nights are reserved date nights for Maria and her husband. Thankfully, they have lots of ties to their church, so it's usually not too hard to line up a babysitter. This particular Friday night, Maria feeds the kids, gives them a bath, and gets them ready for bed. Right about the time that she's getting the kids into their PJs, her husband leaves to go pick up the babysitter. Their house has 3 bedrooms, and the 2 boys share a bedroom in the front, which has this really big window. It's so big that if you look out, you can see almost the entire neighborhood. And the street is really well lit, so even at night, you can still see pretty much everything that's going on outside. So her youngest son and her daughter are in their PJs, and she's in the boys' room helping her oldest son get ready for bed. As she's helping them, she notices a flash of light out of the corner of her eye. She looks up to see what it is and sees something she still doesn't understand. Across the street, just walking down the sidewalk, is a young guy in his early to mid-20s. He's clean cut with short hair, wearing jeans, tennis shoes, and a light-colored t-shirt. Nothing special, right? Except most guys his age don't walk around outside totally encapsulated in a large blue transparent ball of light. It's like some kind of force field from a sci-fi movie. And he's moving in a way that's not quite natural, like a fluid walking motion. His movements are robotic, but Maria can tell he's not a robot. He looks human and he looks intelligent. Even freakier is when he walks fast or starts to run, this blue bubble starts to change, become more pixelated, and the edges around the bubble become jagged, almost like the bit rate can't keep up with the speed. Her son sees him too. He points his finger at the man outside and says, "Look, Mommy, the lightning man." The moment the boy says that, the lightning man stops dead in his tracks and looks straight at Maria. It's like he heard what her son just said from the inside of the house behind a closed window. Maria gets the feeling that he is just as surprised to see them as they are to see him. The lightning man stands there just staring at Maria, and she is just staring right back. While the two are locked in the stare down, the pixelated edges of the bright blue bubble around him smooth out as it kind of pulsates in and out. Then suddenly the guy breaks his stare, turns, and takes off running at a speed that Maria has never seen any human move on foot before, as the blue translucent bubble around him changes back to jagged and pixely again. And the light inside the bubble moves around the man almost like encapsulated lightning. Just as the lightning man takes off, Maria's husband pulls into the driveway with the babysitter, but sees nothing. Maria says that neither she nor her son ever felt threatened at all. It's just kind of a wow kind of moment. Maria and her husband leave and go out for their date night as planned. And she thinks about telling him what she saw, but she knows that if she does, he'll think she's nuts. So she keeps it to herself. And it instead becomes one of those secret touch point moments that she and her son still occasionally talk about to this day. So what is it that Maria and her son saw? Is this bubble mechanism a way to travel to different times or different dimensions? Maybe it's like a life support bubble for beings from another planet. No matter what it actually was, Maria is sure it was not from 1988 Moreno Valley, California. And her experience certainly could be described as catching lightning in a bottle. This last story comes from a very good friend of the channel named Walter. In the early 1990s, Walter lands a truck driving job with a company in Iowa, driving a single bunk Freightliner out west. He loves to drive out west and loves driving at night, especially if he's making a delivery in or near a big city. So one particular night, Walter is driving along the roads of New Mexico and drives right into a thunderstorm. Now, he's been through plenty of thunderstorms before, but nothing prepares him for the storm he encounters on this night. It's about 2 a.m. and he's on a long, straight road that goes on forever. He starts feeling strong wind hitting the truck and trailer. No worries. He's got 26,000 pounds of weight in the trailer and a good truck. He's not going anywhere. Then the lightning hits. Walter is overwhelmed by the brightness, and every time it flashes, he can see for miles. Then the rain comes. Huge, heavy drops that just start pelting his windshield, with the wind getting stronger and stronger. Wow, this is a good one. But Walter notices that he is the only one on the road. All right, not ideal, but okay. Not 10 minutes later, his engine dies. Are you kidding me? He coasts to a stop on the side of the road and puts on his parking lights and four-way flashers. Now, Walter is not a mechanic. The truck has satellite communication, so eventually someone will come out and get him moving again. But being in the middle of nowhere, the idea of sitting there for hours waiting for a repair truck is not at the top of his favorites list. So Walter grabs his flashlight and jumps out to see if he can find the problem. He opens the nose of the truck, not having the slightest idea of what he's even looking for. In less than 5 minutes, he is soaked to the bone, but he finds a big power cord that seems to be able to come apart. Walter pulls the cord apart and finds a fuse and a lot of water. He takes his handkerchief and does his best to dry everything inside that plug and the fuse. Puts everything back together, jumps back inside the truck. Walter says he's not really sure why he says what he says next, that it must have been just the feeling he got from being in that area of the West. Like it seemed like the most appropriate thing for him to say at that moment. He looks up and says, "Great Spirit, I sure could use some help to get this truck to a real repair shop to have it fixed right." Turns the key on, pushes the starter button, and the truck fires up. He is moving again. Walter looks up again and says, "Thank you." Walter heads down the road a ways until he sees a gas station in a little town called Tucumcari. He's wet, tired, and needs to get into some dry clothes. He takes the exit and pulls into the dirt parking lot, deciding that he is done for the night. He gets into the sleeper, changes into dry clothes, and crashes, with the storm still raging. Walter's not sure how long he was asleep, but he has this dream where he sees the most beautiful native woman he has ever seen. He falls in love with her as soon as he sees her. She's wrapped in white fur, meaning that she is somebody pretty important. She says to Walter, "Come see." Come see what? He has no idea. But then he sees an older native man. The woman is in color, but the older male is in black and white. His face looks hard and chiseled with no expression. Walter is startled awake and realizes all his clothes and his sheets, everything is soaked. Thinking the truck must have a leak, he checks the whole sleeper but can't find a single leak. By this time, Walter is beyond exhausted, so he just falls back into his bunk and goes back to sleep. When he wakes up again, sun is just coming up. He needs a coffee and a bathroom. So he heads into the gas station, takes care of business, and heads to the counter. He orders a super large cup of coffee from the woman behind the counter and tells her about what a crazy night he had, both on and off the road. Her face turns a bit pale. Walter asks her, "What's wrong?" And she says, "There's a postcard over there on the display that I think you need to read. It's the legend of how Tucumcari got its name. The native people who once called that place home had a chief who was going to step down. There were 2 warriors he had to choose from, but he couldn't decide. The chief tells the warriors to take their long knives and go away from the tribe. Whichever one returns alive will be the new chief and will receive the hand of the current chief's daughter, Carrie, as a wife. Carrie is in love with Tucum, one of the 2 warriors her father is choosing between. When the 2 warriors go out, Carrie follows them. Tucum is killed by the other warrior. Carrie, in her grief, takes Tucum's knife and kills the other warrior, then turns the blade upon herself. The next day, the old chief finds all their bodies and, in his grief, takes his own life. Walter reads that history and doesn't quite know how, but understands right then that it was Carrie who came to him in his dream the night before. A few years later, Walter, still trucking, stops at a truck stop to grab a bite to eat. Starts up a conversation with another gentleman and ends up telling him the story. That gentleman just happened to be a researcher of native cultures and tells Walter, "What happened to you in the sleeper cab of the truck that night is more than a dream. Between the dream and the waking up with everything all soaked, what you had was a vision." To this day, Walter doesn't know what she wants to show him, but he really wants to visit that spot at least one more time before he crosses over the Rainbow Bridge. But you never know. Maybe when he does, she'll be on the other side to show him. This encounter was sent to us by a woman who was a prison guard in Ontario. She's been medically retired from her job at the penitentiary for a while now, so her non-disclosure is probably elapsed by now. Maybe. Or is it the inmates that she just can't talk about? Let's just call her Kay. The penitentiary Kay works at is about as old and creepy as they come. So, of course, Kay mainly works the midnight shift. The place is filled with violent inmates who, with the exception of a very few, all hate the guards. So, pleasant vibes all around. Now, every hour, the guards have to walk the halls or ranges, which are 2 tiers each of each wing, looking into each cell to make sure everything is normal. And they work in pairs with the first guard who does the walking and the second guard watching the first through both an open office window and on monitors from cameras pointing down the range. This particular hour, Kay's partner, who we will call Scott, is doing the walking. And the first floor is totally fine, but as he comes up the stairs to the second floor, he asks Kay, "Hey, can you do the second floor?" He just says he feels uncomfortable. And Scott's no rookie. He's been doing this for like 16 years. He does not scare easily. But Kay says, "Just do it quick." So Scott starts walking the hall as fast as he can, shining the flashlight into each cell to make sure everything's fine. He gets to the end and turns around to come back. Now, leaning on the metal railing that looks down onto the first floor is a mop in a bucket. As Scott passes it, the mop stands straight up, moves back and forth, goes in circles and slams to the floor. Scott stops in his tracks, his eyes wide as saucers, but Kay thinks hers may have been even wider. She yells, "Run!" And Scott runs as fast as he can back to the office, where they both need a minute to collect themselves again. Scott doesn't do any more walks that night and tells the supervisor exactly why. The supervisor doesn't say a word, just nods his head. Now, that encounter may not seem all that scary to us listeners in YouTube land, but that's not the only encounter Kay has. That prison has another area with a hospital upstairs from the nurses' and doctors' offices. And again, every hour they have to do walks. Thankfully, the range is much shorter. In this area, they have to go down 2 different halls. The walk on one side is never an issue, totally fine. But the other side is a different story. Every time she walks this range, Kay can feel something like a presence walking right behind her. And remember, this is night, so no one else is supposed to be there. She can feel dread and anger coming from whatever this invisible entity is, as every hair on her body stands up. Kay begs Scott, "Please come with me." Scott says, "No way. I feel it too, so forget it." One particular night, another jail is bringing in an inmate, and Kay jumps at the chance to go downstairs and let them in before Scott has a chance to say boo. Kay takes the elevator downstairs. Now, when the elevator goes down and the doors open, whoever's inside has the perfect view of the monitors in the guard station right across the hall. And the monitors are, of course, pointing down every hallway. As the elevator doors open for Kay, she sees the bank of monitors, and on one of those monitors, she sees a dark shadow fly across the screen. Her first thought is that she must be causing some kind of reflection or something. So she starts waving her arms around while watching the monitor, trying to recreate what she just saw. But she can't. So she just ignores it and sits down at the desk in the guard station. About 5 minutes later, Kay hears a noise, almost like someone sliding a box across the floor, coming from one of the back halls. It's summer, so she thinks, well, someone must have left the windows open and somebody's doing something outside. So she gets up, checks the windows, and they're all closed. So she goes back to the desk, and a few minutes later, she hears it again. Kay eases back on her chair and looks over to where she thinks the sound is coming from, but there's nothing there. She sits back up and looks at the monitor as this large black mass floats across the screen. Kay's blood runs cold. She grabs the keys and sprints toward the stairway that goes upstairs because there is no way she is waiting around for the elevator. She gets back upstairs and back to her office, her whole body shaking with fear and adrenaline. Her office is attached to the nurse's office. So when the nurse hears Kay come crashing back to her office, the nurse comes in asking where the new inmate is. And Kay says, "He's not here yet, but there's no way I'm going back down there." She tells the nurse about what just happened down there. And the nurse says, "Oh, that's just Ray. He's harmless." Kay is completely gobsmacked and on the verge of tears. "You knew there was a ghost down there and you didn't tell me?" Needless to say, Kay never goes back to the hospital area at night again. About a month later, Kay is sitting around with a bunch of other guards and actually gathers the fortitude, despite the almost certain mockfest she's about to receive, to tell everyone about her experience that night in the hospital area. And to her surprise, the mocking never comes. Everyone just sits there quiet when Kay's supervisor, who we'll call Nick, chimes in. "I had a ghost or a demon or something follow me home." Well, that certainly gets everyone's attention. Nick goes on to say that It started out at home with things being moved, a cold spot in the room here and there, and the occasional whiff of rotten meat or sewage. He thinks maybe he's got a hole in one of his pipes or something, so he calls a plumber, but the plumber says everything looks fine. Over the next couple of months, items in the house continue to disappear and show up again in weird places, and the cold spots get more frequent. And just to let you know, this is summertime, hot and humid, and they don't have air conditioning. They hear strange sounds in the house, and that awful smell keeps wafting through the house. Nick starts to think maybe some animal got into the attic and died. That would account for both the sounds and the smell. So he goes up into the attic and looks, but he doesn't find anything. He calls an exterminator to go check out the attic, and even he says everything looks good. While all of this is going on, both Nick and his wife, who we'll call Helen, are having trouble sleeping. They're both having nightmares and even waking up with scratches on them. All of this activity is slowly ramping up over time, but Nick and his wife do not put two and two together until the night that something slaps Nick in the face. Helen turns on the light to see the perfect outline of a hand in red on Nick's cheek. And that's when they realize there might be something bigger than broken pipes going on here. All the pieces sort of fall into place in their heads. They start to sleep with the lights on, but that doesn't help. Things just continue to get worse until the night Nick wakes up to Helen crying out in pain. On her shoulder is a bite mark. Helen says, "I can't stay here," and leaves to go stay in a hotel for the night. The next week is pretty quiet. Maybe it's gone, but it's not. A few nights later, Nick wakes up to Helen screaming, but realizes that he can't move, like hands are holding him down. He can't do anything except lay on his side, looking at his wife, who also doesn't seem to be able to move, as some unseen force pulls her hair and slaps her face. Helen starts praying to Saint Michael, and the attack stops, and they can move again. And this time, they both get up and go to a hotel. And Helen never steps foot in that house again. So Nick is at the end of his rope, and he's hanging out with a friend one day and just starts telling the friend everything. The friend's wife overhears the conversation and tells Nick that she knows a friend of a friend who's a medium. Nick has no idea what that means, but who cares? If it helps, he's all in. He meets the man at a coffee shop, and even before Nick can tell him what is going on, the man says, "You've got something very dark following you around." He says he thinks it used to be human, but isn't anymore, and that whatever it is probably attached itself to him and followed him to his house. He then tells Nick, "Go get yourself blessed and get a St. Michael's pendant. Never take it off. And as far as the house goes, you need to get a priest and a shaman. That's the only way to get rid of it." The house is not built on burial ground, but it used to be Anishinaabe tribal land, thus the need for the shaman as well. Now, Nick isn't particularly religious, but Helen is Catholic. So Helen talks to her priest at church, and Nick talks to a Native American inmate at the prison about finding a shaman. The priest and the shaman do their blessings and rituals. By all accounts, it works. However, Helen still leaves him. She just can't take the stress of not knowing if Nick might bring something else home someday. Now, everyone at work knew Nick had gotten a divorce. Unfortunately, that's pretty common, but none of them would ever have guessed that Nick's divorce was caused by a demon.